My name is Linda Whittaker. I'm 59 years old, and I live alone in a quiet second-floor apartment in Spokane, Washington. The building's old, the kind where the plumbing hums when someone takes a shower downstairs. But it's mine, and it's peaceful. For the last 16 years, I've cleaned other people's homes for a living. Some days I scrub kitchen tile until my back aches. Other days I polish glass that overlooks views I'll never afford. It's honest work, and I do it well, though no one ever dreams of becoming a cleaning lady. But I wasn't always this version of myself. Once, I was Linda Hamilton Whittaker, wife of a sharp-talking defense attorney, mother of two, co-host of elegant fundraisers and birthday parties with white linen and finger foods. I used to have a walk-in closet, a garden with roses, and a husband who kissed me on the forehead before court. Those things don't really vanish overnight. They erode, piece by piece, until one day you wake up in a life you barely recognize. My kids grew up, my marriage ended, and the house we built became a listing in someone else's name. I've spent years trying not to miss what I lost. Then, last week, I got a text. My son Nathan, who now lives somewhere in the hills outside Seattle, wrote, "Mom, I'm having a birthday dinner next Saturday. Can you come at 7? It was short, too simple for what it stirred in me. Nathan hasn't invited me to anything in years. He and his wife usually host their holidays in ski lodges or wine country rentals. I send cards. They sometimes text back, sometimes don't. But this invite was different. I stared at the message for a long time before I answered. Yes, I'd love to. What should I bring? His reply came fast. Just yourself. That was all it took to unearth something I'd buried. I started wondering what I would wear, how I would get there, whether his friends would even know who I was. I pictured the kind of house that has a driveway too long for walking and rooms too clean for living. And still, I felt something soft move inside me, a flicker of maybe, a whisper of being seen again. I wanted to believe he meant it, that I still mattered enough to be invited not out of obligation, but because he wanted me there. I stood in my tiny kitchen and reread his message until the screen went dim. Then I set down the phone and looked around. My apartment was filled with things I'd chosen secondhand. A chipped lamp from a yard sale, a chair I reupholstered myself. Nothing fancy, but everything earned. For years, I've lived quietly, and I've told myself that was enough. But something about that text unsettled the quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure if I should feel grateful or afraid. The morning I got Nathan's message, I was standing at the laundromat, folding a stack of pillowcases for one of my clients. The dryers buzzed behind me, and the air smelled faintly of lavender softener and coin dust. My phone chimed in my pocket, and when I saw his name, I held my breath. It was short. "Mom, I'm having a birthday dinner next Saturday. Can you come at 7? I must have read it 4 times before I understood he was inviting me to his home, not just letting me know it was his birthday. I answered too quickly. I'd love to. What should I bring? The dots appeared almost immediately. Just yourself. I stood still for a while, pillowcase in hand, suddenly unsure what to do with the softness. On the bus ride home, I leaned against the window and stared out at Spokane's narrow streets, watching old snow turn to slush. My heart wasn't racing, exactly. It was heavy, full of things I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. I tried not to get ahead of myself. Maybe it was just logistics. Maybe his wife was throwing something formal and he thought it polite to include me. But part of me hoped he missed me, that somewhere inside his polished new life, he still remembered who I used to be. By the time I got back to my apartment, I was already making a list. I wrote down what time the bus came, which shoes had the lowest heel, and whether I still had that black dress tucked in the back of the closet. It had been years since I dressed for anything other than work or church. The dress still fit, though it hung looser now. I'd worn it once to a memorial for one of my older clients, a widow with too many cats and a love for lemon cake. I told myself it would pass for elegant, or at least simple. I gave it a fresh wash and hung it by the window to air out. I made an appointment at the salon near the dollar store, just a trim and a blowout. The stylist didn't say much, just nodded when I showed her the photo. I left with my hair a little shorter and a little softer, and for a moment, I didn't mind my reflection. Then I walked to the thrift shop across the street. I didn't know what I was looking for until I saw it. A small silver photo frame, tarnished at the edges but still lovely. I bought it, took it home, and placed inside it a picture of Nathan when he was 5, building sandcastles at Cannon Beach. He used to call the ocean his giant friend. That photo used to sit on my nightstand when the kids were small. It reminded me of summers before everything fell apart, before his father left, before the lawyers, before Nathan's voice went quiet in my life. On the day of the party, I woke up early and cleaned my apartment like I was expecting company. I made my bed twice, steamed my dress again, and took my time with my makeup, even though I usually skipped it altogether. I wanted to look like someone worth remembering. I caught the bus 2 hours before the dinner started. It took me halfway up the hill, and from there I ordered a rideshare. The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror, asked if I was headed to a party. I smiled and said it was my son's birthday. That seemed to surprise him. The neighborhood looked like something out of a magazine. Wide driveways, trimmed hedges, houses with glass railings, and no visible curtains. I felt small the moment we turned onto the street, like a visitor in a place that didn't know what to do with me. His house was at the top of the hill, modern, sleek, with windows so tall they showed the whole skyline behind them. I stood outside for a moment, gathering myself. Then I pressed the bell. Nathan opened the door in a navy suit that fit like it was tailored. He looked older, sharper, more like his father than I remembered. His eyes didn't warm when he saw me, but he nodded and stepped aside. "You made it," he said, and just like that, I was inside. I handed him the gift bag with the photo frame. He didn't open it, just said thanks and set it on a side table. Then he turned and led me through the house, past furniture that looked untouched and paintings I didn't recognize. I tried to keep up, both with his pace and with the memory of who I used to be. I didn't belong here anymore, but I smiled anyway. I'd taught myself how to be small in other people's spaces. As we walked toward the back patio, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in one of the glass doors. I looked tidy, composed, but behind the eyes, I saw the same question I'd carried for years. Would they ever see me again? Or was I just the woman who raised them, then quietly disappeared? The laughter outside grew louder as we stepped onto the deck, and I tightened my grip on my purse, hoping my silence wouldn't be mistaken for weakness. Not this time. Nathan barely made eye contact when he opened the door. His smile was thin, practiced, the kind people wear in boardrooms and networking events. He stepped aside quickly, not offering a hug, just a gesture to come in. The hallway was spotless and quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't invite conversation. I heard distant music, the soft clink of glasses, and the low murmur of laughter coming from the back. He walked ahead without looking back to see if I was following. His voice was even when he said everyone was out by the pool. I asked who everyone was, though I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. He mentioned his colleagues, Kelsey's family, and casually added my ex-husband and his wife. The words landed quietly but stayed heavy. I hadn't seen Jeffrey or his wife in over a decade, not since my daughter's wedding, where I sat near the kitchen while they toasted from the head table. I nodded like I wasn't surprised, even though I was. Kelsey met me on the patio, dressed in a fitted red dress that looked like it came with its own price tag. She kissed my cheek with the kind of quick motion people use when they're avoiding contact. She said it was a surprise to see me, and I wasn't sure whether she meant that in a good way. She didn't ask how I'd been. She didn't mention the gift in my hand. Instead, she turned to greet someone behind me, leaving me standing alone with the view. I looked out at the pool and the city stretched beneath it. The lights shimmered like they belonged to someone else's story. I could hear bits of conversation about real estate and private schools, voices layered with casual confidence. Nobody offered to show me around. No one asked how I'd gotten there or offered me a drink. I watched my son slip back into the crowd, his hand resting on Kelsey's lower back, as if I had never been part of where he came from. I stood still, letting the air settle around me. I didn't want to embarrass him. I didn't want to be the mother who made people uncomfortable, but part of me hoped someone might remember what I used to mean. Instead, a server walked by with a tray of champagne. I took one and nodded politely. My hand trembled a little, but I smiled anyway. The kind of smile you practice in mirrors when you're alone. For the next several minutes, I drifted from one edge of the party to another, stopping near potted plants or half-empty chairs. A few people looked my way, but their glances passed right through me. It was like being dressed up for a part I was no longer allowed to play. The house, the crowd, even the sky felt too clean, too polished. There was no room for the woman I had become. And in that space between who I was and who they now were, a quiet ache began to bloom. I moved through the crowd slowly, careful not to stand too long in one spot. The patio was full of people who belonged here, people who moved with ease between laughter and conversation. I held my glass like a shield, sipping from it just enough to stay busy. No one really noticed me. A few offered polite nods, the kind you give a stranger who might be a neighbor or a distant acquaintance. I smiled back, even when I wasn't sure they meant it for me. I tried to find a familiar face but saw only silhouettes of a life that had moved on without me. Nathan stood near the grill, laughing with someone tall and well-dressed, his hand resting on Kelsey's waist like a second skin. I waited for his eyes to find me, but they never did. I drifted toward the edge of the pool, pretending to admire the lights of the city below. Spokane glittered in the distance like a postcard, sharp and unreachable. The music was low and jazzy, just loud enough to hide the silence between people like me. Someone brushed past, their perfume sharp and expensive. I turned slightly, half expecting a greeting, but it was just a woman reaching for a glass of wine from the tray beside me. She didn't look back. I stepped further from the crowd, closer to the glass railing, and leaned against it lightly. My heels ached. The night air was warm, but I felt chilled in my shoulders. I kept thinking maybe Sophie would show up. Maybe one of them would call my name. But no one did. I saw Jeffrey then, standing near the bar with his second wife. He looked the same, only grayer and more polished. He glanced in my direction but didn't pause. His smile was reserved for someone else. They say the worst kind of loneliness is the one you feel in a room full of people. I never understood that until tonight. I wasn't just alone, I was invisible. I moved back into the house, hoping to find a quieter space. Every room looked like a magazine spread, perfect and untouched. I found a hallway lined with soft lighting and expensive art, and I walked it like I belonged, even though I didn't. A photo caught my eye on a side table. Nathan and Kelsey smiling in front of a Christmas tree, surrounded by her family. No sign of me. No sign of the years I spent keeping him safe, fed, clothed, loved. I blinked hard, then kept walking. I didn't want to cry, not here. Not in this place that had already decided I didn't count. I ended up in the guest bathroom, closing the door quietly behind me. The mirror above the sink was flawless. I looked tired in it, not old, just worn down in a way you can't fix with makeup. I splashed cold water on my face and waited until the sting in my chest softened. I knew I had to go back out there. I had to smile a little more, stay a little longer. But in that moment, I let myself feel it. I let myself stand still and admit that I didn't know who my son was anymore. And worse, I wasn't sure he knew who I was either. I had just stepped back out onto the patio when Nathan appeared with a small group of people trailing behind him. They were younger than me, maybe his co-workers or business partners, polished, confident, wearing clothes that fit like second skin. He called out, said he wanted to introduce me. I straightened up a little, tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. One of the men looked at me and asked if I was the mother he'd heard about. Nathan laughed, not in a mean way exactly, but like he was brushing something off. Yeah, this is my mom, Linda. She runs a cleaning service. I smiled, trying to meet their eyes. One of them nodded and said that was very entrepreneurial. There was a pause, just long enough to feel awkward. Another man asked what it was like to clean for rich people. Before I could answer, Nathan spoke again, fast and light. She doesn't work for celebrities or anything, just regular houses. I looked at him, waiting for him to say something kinder, something closer to the truth. He didn't. Actually, I said quietly, many of my clients are pretty well known. I've worked in homes most people only see on magazine covers. Nathan's expression tightened, and he spoke low, just loud enough for them to hear. "Don't exaggerate, Mom." I stared at him, my hand still around my glass. I've worked hard. I've built a business that pays my bills. That should mean something." Another silence followed, thicker than the first. One of his friends laughed awkwardly and mentioned his mom was an accountant. Said that sounded boring compared to cleaning. I couldn't tell if he was trying to make me feel better or worse. "There's nothing boring about honest work," I said. My voice was steady, but I felt heat rising in my face. Nathan looked away. "She cleans because she didn't finish college," he said. "She didn't have many options." It hit me hard. Not because it wasn't true, but because of how he said it. Like my life had been one long mistake he was still trying to explain away. "I clean," I said, "because when your father left us with nothing, I had to. I clean because it gave me the freedom to be there when you needed someone to pick you up from school, or bring you soup when you had the flu. I clean because it kept a roof over your head." He looked embarrassed, like I'd made a scene, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just stood there and told the truth. The others drifted off, sensing tension they didn't want to be part of. Nathan didn't say much after that. He took a sip from his drink and stared off at the pool. And that's when I knew I hadn't been invited here to be celebrated. I had been brought in like an afterthought, a polite obligation, a curiosity, the woman who used to matter but didn't fit anymore. I stood there for a few moments longer, finishing my drink in silence. Around me, the party moved on like I wasn't there, and I realized I couldn't keep pretending I still belonged. I waited until the group had drifted just far enough away that only Nathan could really hear me. He stood beside the outdoor bar, tapping his glass like he was trying to will the conversation away. I stepped closer, slow and calm. "You may not see it," I said, "but I built something out of nothing. I took a job people looked down on and turned it into a life that kept you safe. You never went hungry. You never missed a field trip. And you sure as hell never had to walk to school in the rain." He didn't look at me, not really. His jaw was tight, like he wanted to stop me but didn't know how. I kept going, not louder, just clearer. "I cleaned houses because your father left us with nothing but debt and silence. I gave up the life I thought I'd have to make sure you could chase yours. And now you introduce me like a line item on your resume. Something polite but forgettable." I let the weight of it sit there between us. His friends were laughing again a few feet away, oblivious. Kelsey was across the patio, chatting with someone in a silk blazer. "I never asked for thanks, Nathan. I never asked for credit, but I won't be made small in a room I helped you reach." He opened his mouth, then shut it. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was thick with something older, something he didn't know how to carry. I set my empty glass on the bar and straightened my shoulders. "I'm not ashamed of my work. I'm ashamed of how little you see it." Then I turned and walked past the pool, past the string lights and the soft music. No one stopped me, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to stay in the room. By the time I got home, my shoes felt like bricks. I dropped my purse on the counter, stepped out of them, and let the door close behind me with a soft thud. The quiet of my apartment wrapped around me like an old sweater. I poured a small glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table without turning on the lights. The city outside my window was quiet now, just a few scattered headlights and the hum of distant traffic. I sat still for a long time, replaying the night in my head like a film I didn't ask to watch. Then I stood up, walked to the bookshelf by the window, and pulled down the worn yellow cookbook tucked on the end. Inside it was a hollow cutout, and inside that, a folder. I hadn't opened it in years. I carried it to the table and set it down gently. My fingers hovered over it for a moment. Then I opened it. Inside were documents I couldn't forget, no matter how hard I'd tried. Bank records, wire transfers, letters with routing numbers and names of companies I later learned were shell accounts, all of it tied to Jeffrey. We were married 20 years. He handled the money, the taxes, the paperwork. I handled the home, the kids, the real life underneath the suits and the courtroom victories. When he left, he made it sound like a clean break, but it wasn't. He'd already tucked money into places I didn't know existed. During the divorce, he swore under oath there were no offshore accounts, no hidden income. But there was, and one person knew the truth. Jeffrey's former business partner, a man named Harold Canning, came to me quietly 6 months after the divorce. He'd been pushed out of their firm during a buyout and wanted revenge. He handed me this folder and said if I ever wanted justice, this was how to get it. I remember staring at the documents, my hands shaking. Harold said I could take it to a lawyer, reopen the case, maybe get back half of everything I'd lost. I told him I needed time. But the time never came. I was afraid of what the scandal would do to Nathan and Sophie, afraid they'd think I was dragging their father through the mud, afraid they'd stop speaking to me altogether. So I stayed silent for 15 years. I built a life from scratch while their father bought vacation homes. I scrubbed floors while he invested in wine cellars. I sacrificed my name so they wouldn't have to carry the weight of his lies. But tonight, something shifted. I saw myself through my son's eyes. Small, embarrassing, less than. I traced the edge of one document with my fingertip, then set my hand flat on the folder. I wasn't angry. I was clear. I had protected everyone but myself, and they had thanked me with distance and shame. Maybe it was time to stop protecting a man who built his comfort on my silence. I reached for my phone and opened the contacts. I still had Harold's number, memorized in case I ever got brave enough. I tapped the screen and waited. When he answered, his voice was cautious. I told him who I was. He went quiet for a second. Then he said, "It's time, isn't it?" I said yes. I said I was done living like I owed anyone silence. And for the first time in years, I felt my back straighten, not from pride, from relief. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed with the folder beside me, the soft hum of the fridge in the background, the city barely alive outside my window. My apartment felt smaller than usual, but not in a bad way, just close enough to hold me steady. I thought about all the years I'd spent convincing myself silence was noble, that it was better to swallow the truth than spill it where it might ruin someone else's comfort. I thought I was protecting my children. I thought I was doing the right thing. But silence had a cost. It had eaten away at my dignity, chipped at my pride, and turned me into a woman my own son couldn't look in the eye. He didn't know what I'd carried, so he never thought to thank me for it. The folder sat there like a quiet witness. Every paper inside it a truth I'd hidden, a fight I'd postponed, not out of weakness, out of love, but now that love felt lopsided, and I was tired of being the only one holding it up. I picked up my phone again and scrolled to Harold's number. I didn't overthink it this time. I just hit call and held the phone to my ear. When he answered, I told him my name. There was a pause, not long, but deep. Then he said, "I figured you'd call one day." I told him I was ready, not angry, just ready. Ready to stop pretending that silence was strength. Ready to stop erasing myself for the sake of someone else's comfort. Harold didn't ask questions. He just said, "Come by my office tomorrow. Bring everything." When I hung up, I felt still, not nervous, not relieved, just clear. I folded the documents back into the folder and placed it in my bag. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The world hadn't changed, but something inside me had. I had waited 15 years to find this moment. Not revenge, not rage, just the right to stop being quiet. And for the first time since the night Jeffrey left, I felt like I had something that belonged to me again. My voice, my truth, my name. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I didn't need an alarm. My mind was already dressed, already out the door. I got ready quietly, choosing my clothes with care, not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I wanted to feel solid in my skin. The law office sat in a high-rise downtown, all glass and angles. I'd passed by it 100 times, but never walked through the door. When I stepped inside, the receptionist greeted me by name. That alone made me feel like I belonged. Mitchell Crane was younger than I expected. Sharp eyes, calm voice, the kind of presence that made people listen without having to ask twice. He took the folder from my hands and opened it carefully. as if he already knew the weight it carried. He read in silence, flipping each page slowly, sometimes going back to double-check something. I watched his expression sharpen the further he read. After a while, he looked up. He said I had a case, a strong one, divorce fraud, asset concealment, maybe even criminal charges depending on how far I wanted to go. He asked if I was ready. I nodded. I didn't feel scared. I felt steady. He laid out next steps, quiet meetings, subpoenas, filings. He said it would take time, but he didn't doubt the outcome. He told me I had been more than patient, that the law had room for women like me. I almost believed him. That afternoon, I met with Jessica Kwan at a small cafe near the beach. She was dressed in jeans and a blazer, hair tied back, no pretense. She looked me in the eye and said she'd heard whispers about Jeffrey for years, but no one had ever stepped forward with proof. I handed her a copy of the folder. She flipped through it quickly, her brow furrowing as she scanned numbers and notes. She asked careful questions, not for drama, but for clarity. I told her everything, how I found out, why I stayed silent, what I was afraid of. She listened without judgment, her pen moving across the notebook like a quiet thread stitching truth into place. She said the story needed telling, but she would wait until the legal process started before publishing anything. She promised to verify every detail, down to the account numbers. I thanked her. She said, "No, thank you. You're not the first woman this happened to, but you might be the first one to speak." On the bus ride home, my phone buzzed. A message from Nathan. "Mom, I'm sorry if I embarrassed you. Please call me." I didn't reply. Later that night, another one came in. This time from Sophie. Heard from Nathan. He said you were upset. Can we talk? I put the phone face down on the table and went to wash the dishes. I didn't need to explain myself. Not now, not anymore. The next few days passed in a kind of calm I hadn't felt in years. Mitchell sent updates. Jessica checked in with follow-up questions. I made my rounds to cleaning jobs, my routine unchanged on the surface. But inside, everything had shifted. I moved through homes that sparkled with wealth, but I no longer felt beneath them. I knew something none of these people knew. That truth ages, but it doesn't die. It waits for the right moment to be spoken. Each time my phone lit up, I let it ring. Nathan sent a picture of his son. Sophie sent a voice memo. I saved them. I didn't listen. I wasn't punishing them. I was holding space for myself. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It looked like walking down a quiet hallway with your head high. It looked like finally telling your story without waiting for someone else to give you permission. By the end of the week, I felt taller, not younger, not tougher, just clear. I hadn't gone looking for revenge. I had gone looking for peace, and step by step, I was finding it. The article went live on a Wednesday morning. I didn't know the exact time until my phone started buzzing like it was on fire. I turned it over, saw my name in the headline, and stared at it for a long time before clicking. Jessica had kept her promise. The story was detailed, careful, but unflinching. It laid out the shell companies, the account transfers, the legal gaps he'd slipped through. It didn't paint me as a victim. It painted me as the one who finally said enough. My name sat between quotes that echoed what I had told her. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth to stop hiding behind nice suits and expensive lawyers. By noon, Mitchell called. He said Jeffrey's legal team had reached out with an offer. $3 million and silence. No admission of wrongdoing. No court. I let the words hang in the air before answering. Tell them no. I want half. And I want the truth on paper. He didn't push. He just said okay. Then he got to work. By afternoon, my inbox was flooded. Old friends, former clients, even women I hadn't spoken to in years. Some sent notes of support. Others sent their own stories. I read every word, slowly, carefully. That night, my phone buzzed again. Nathan's name. His message was short. "Mom, my job is at risk. Please talk to me." I set the phone down and went to refill my water. 10 minutes later, Sophie messaged. She said the article had caused a mess, that her husband's family was upset, that I should have warned them. I sat on the edge of my bed and closed my eyes. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I just didn't have it in me to soothe people who had only ever shown up when they were uncomfortable. I slept deeply that night. For the first time in years, I didn't dream about courtrooms or blank stares from people I loved. I dreamed about silence, not the kind I had swallowed, the kind I had earned. The next morning, Mitchell confirmed what I already knew. The documents were airtight. We had leverage. If they didn't settle for what we asked, we'd go to court. I told him I wasn't in a hurry. Let them sit with it. Over the next week, I watched the world move around me like I wasn't part of the storm anymore. I went to work. I took the long route home. I cooked dinner and opened my windows wide. The wind felt different now. It carried something with it, not hope exactly. More like peace that had been waiting in the corner all along. When the second settlement offer came in, it included the house I'd once lived in. I turned it down. I didn't want the past back. I just wanted what I had been owed. Nathan called twice, left voicemails. His voice sounded younger somehow, shaken. Sophie emailed. Her subject line just said, "Please?" I didn't respond, not yet. Some things take time to settle, and this time, I wasn't cleaning up anyone else's mess. I was walking through the middle of my own story, and for once, I liked where it was heading. The evening light spilled across my living room in soft gold. I sat in my usual chair by the window, a glass of wine resting on the little table beside me. My apartment was quiet, but it wasn't empty. I had the article open on my laptop, the same one I'd read before, but this time I didn't skim. I let each word sit with me. I read slowly, letting the truth settle in like an old friend finally coming home. There was no rage in me anymore, no shame either, just space where something tight used to be. The wine tasted fuller than usual, or maybe I just noticed it more now. Every little thing felt like it belonged. I looked around at the room I'd built piece by piece, the lamp from a flea market, the quilt I stitched over long winters, the bookshelf still missing one leg, propped up by a brick I found behind the building. None of it was perfect, but none of it was borrowed. It was mine. I reached for my phone, not to check for messages, but to turn it off. I didn't need anyone's voice to tell me I was okay. I already knew. Outside, a breeze brushed the window, and the street lamp flickered on. The world was still moving, but I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I closed the laptop and leaned back, the quiet stretching around me like a soft blanket. My name had been used, ignored, reshaped by others. But tonight, it belonged to me again. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel erased. I felt seen.